P9C got the fucking juice.
Silver's the new gold.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of JT Sports Live. I'm your host, JT. Hope everybody's doing well on this Wednesday afternoon. Christmas is just around the corner, and we got a really good holiday present coming up this weekend. Not only do we have Texans, Chiefs, Ravens, Steelers, but we also have the college football playoffs being played on the same day as well. So it's just double the gift of football this holiday season. I'm really thankful, really appreciative of all of the great football that we are about to see played over these next couple of days. But on this episode, though, I want to lead the show off discussing the holiday gift that the Falcons just gave their organization and the rest of their fan base, finally benching Kirk Cousins in favor of Michael Penix. And I was really high on Michael Penix when he was coming out of Washington. As a matter of fact, he is one of the best pure passers, one of the best pure throwers of the football that I have ever evaluated. There's a reason why I call him the Archer. And going from Kirk to Penix, I feel is going to be what can ignite the Falcons making a late season resurgence, possibly making it into the playoffs, and maybe making a little bit of noise. I felt Michael Penix was good enough to start day one on any team that drafted him. And when the Falcons took him 8th overall, they kind of screwed a bunch of teams over who were in the market for a quarterback, such as the Las Vegas Raiders, prime example. And I want to just give my thoughts on what to expect out of Michael Penix these final 3 games. I got to talk about the NFL MVP hypocrisy right now, because the debate is either Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson. Some people may say Saquon Barkley, but it mainly comes down to those 2 quarterbacks. Both of these guys have been the 2 best quarterbacks in the NFL this year. Nobody can deny that. I mean, Josh Allen, he's been carrying the Buffalo Bills. They got the best record in the league. And the expectations for the Bills coming into this season was that this was going to be a down year for them with everybody that they lost during the offseason. Stephon Diggs, Gabe Davis, several starters on the defense. They were not expected to be as good as what they have been up to this point. Meanwhile, Lamar Jackson, at this rate, he could break the NFL's all-time single-season record for passing rating. And he also is putting up career-high numbers in passing yards, touchdowns, completion percentage. But last year, even though Josh Allen had better stats than Lamar ended up taking home MVP because the Ravens had a better record. And this season, the tables have turned. Josh Allen doesn't have as good a stats as what Lamar has put up, but the Buffalo Bills have a better record than the Baltimore Ravens. So who wins MVP this year? The Chicago Bears, they already have broken their young quarterback, Caleb Williams. He just looks deflated. He just doesn't have any confidence. Is there any way that they can help this brother out before they ruin, once again, another promising young quarterback talent? The transfer portal in college football, yes, we are mixing in college football with the NFL on this episode because I feel like the transfer portal has diluted the talent that we have coming into the NFL draft this year. And the reason why I feel this way is because when I have listened to draft experts talk about the 2025 draft class, they say that there really are only 10, 15 players that are worth being drafted in the first round. And this could be one of the least talented drafts that we have had since 2012, 2013. And I think the portal is a huge reasoning for that. I also want to give some thoughts on the Saturday games between the Texans and the Chiefs, the Ravens and the Steelers, and then we're just going to bounce around the league. I got thoughts on the Buccaneers. They've been a hot team that I've been hearing a lot about. The Browns are running it back with Deshaun Watson, so the quarterback nightmare for Cleveland fans is not going to end. But there's a way that they can find a way out of that nightmare. And the Las Vegas Raiders, there's this presumption that drafting a quarterback is going to fix all their problems, but the Raiders are not a quarterback away from being a playoff team. They got a lot of issues. I want to break those down. Shout out to everybody that's tuned in, wherever you're watching, YouTube, X, Facebook. Smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit that bell icon so you don't miss when we go live and drop new content. Shout out to my guy, Pippin, the Barcelo. Sorry if I mispronounced that. He said, let's go, Lamar MVP. Make sure that you give us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcast from. Apple, Amazon, Spotify. The JT Sports Podcast is available. The link is down in the description down below. And let's dive into it after I get me a quick sip real quick. All right. The Michael Penix era in Atlanta has officially begun. He's going to be getting his first start this week against the New York Giants. They have finally benched Kirk Cousins, which is a move that happened sooner rather than later. I felt they should have went ahead and started Michael Penix last week, but it's hard to move on from somebody like Kirk Cousins when you invested so much into him during the offseason. But the NFL is a production-based business, and at the end of the day, you can't continue to stick with the guy because you paid him a lot of money when he's not playing winning football. And they got lucky that they were able to survive the Las Vegas Raiders, because that's a game that you expect the team with the talent that the Falcons have to dominate, because the Raiders are supposed to be tanking for Shedeur. And after the game, when they asked Kirk Cousins and they asked Raheem Morris about how he felt about his performance, both acknowledged that, you know, Kirk didn't play well. He even admitted that, and Raheem Morris said that he needed to play better. And as soon as Raheem said that, I knew that Michael Penix was about to get the job. And what Falcons fans can expect out of Michael Penix is that, for one, you're going to have somebody that is going to come in right away and immediately provide a spark that this team has desperately needed over the last month or so, because they are 1-4 in their last 5 games, and Kirk Cousins has hindered this team's performance down the stretch because of his inability to be able to move around in the pocket. He's a statue back there, and a lot of his lack of mobility is due to him coming off that Achilles injury, and it was so bad to the point where their offensive coordinator was running the football to a certain side more favorably because Kirk Cousins was faster handing the football off when the run was going that direction, because he can't really move off his left leg because of that Achilles injury. So with his limited mobility, not only did it hinder the Falcons' offense, but it also made them more predictable. When you get in third down situations, it's easy to defend a quarterback that isn't a threat to run. Michael Penix is a fantastic athlete. So defenses are going to have to game plan around Michael Penix being able to pick up yards with his legs. Now, Michael Penix, although he does have the ability to run, don't get it twisted, this brother is a fantastic thrower of the football from within the pocket. He has elite arm strength. In the preseason, he threw a lot of great passes into tight windows and a lot of cover 2 hole shots. And his arm strength is going to increase the production that Atlanta is going to get when it comes to generating explosive plays in the vertical passing game. Because when the Falcons started off 6-3 early during this season, they were able to get a lot of big plays throwing the football. Darnell Mooney was doing a lot of damage downfield. Same thing with Kyle Pitts. Drake London was more of your possession receiver. And as we have progressed throughout the season, we started to see less and less explosives out of the Falcons passing game. So now with Michael Penix, with how good of an arm he has, he's going to be able to provide the Falcons with the ability to get more out of the deep passing attack. And overall, he's a great leader. Okay, when you listen to Michael Penix talk, he's somebody that is easy to like. He's somebody that's easy to root for and easy to get behind. And I believe that he is going to have a similar impact these last 3 games for the Falcons to what Lamar Jackson had his rookie season when he came in and went 7-1 as a starter, turned the Ravens season around, saved John Harbaugh's job, and got them into the postseason. Michael Penix is one of those kinds of quarterbacks that he's a winner, he has a great attitude, and he just changes the vibe of the franchise. Because these last 3 games for the Falcons are pretty winnable. You play the Giants coming up. That pretty much is going to be a tune-up game for Michael Penix. It's going to allow him to get his feet wet because next week he's squaring off against Jaden Daniels, who also was drafted very high in this past year's draft, who has his team in playoff position. And there's a lot riding on Michael Penix. If there ever was a good test to figure out if this guy has what it takes to lead the Falcons to success over these next couple of decades, this is going to be it. You got 3 games left. You're on the outside looking into the postseason, and you're trying to make a playoff push. This is the situation that you live for if you're a guy like Michael Penix, and you're jumping at the bit to prove yourself. Can you be able to lead the Falcons to 3 straight wins, getting them into the playoffs, and then maybe make a little bit of noise? Because the Falcons have the talent of a playoff team. If they miss the playoffs, it will be a major disappointment. There was never supposed to be a rebuilding year for Atlanta this year. When they hired Raheem Morris and they brought in this new regime, the expectation was to win this division because it was supposed to be weak and it was supposed to be an easy lock into the postseason. The talent is there. They got a good offensive line. Bijan Robinson is having an incredible second season in a breakout year. You got a lot of weapons around Michael Penix. The defense isn't that great, but the defense has slightly improved over these last couple of games. So there is more than enough around Michael Penix for the Falcons to be able to make this playoff push. And I think that Michael Penix is going to be able to save the Falcons season, or at least be able to salvage it. And what I mean by that is getting them into the postseason, because missing the playoffs, I think it's a fireable offense. Because Raheem Morris, with what we have seen over these last couple of weeks, I definitely think that there is a little bit of skepticism about if he is the right guy to lead the Falcons to success in the future. And without a playoff appearance this year, he want to be no different from Arthur Smith. So Michael Penix, I think that he's going to be able to buy Raheem Morris a little bit more goodwill over these next couple of weeks with how good he should play. Their offensive coordinator is really good. Michael Penix, he's a baller. There's a reason why I call him the Archer. He is a really prolific thrower of the football. He was day one material. And the fact that he had the luxury of being able to sit, not being thrown to the wolves early, only benefits him. So I'm excited to see what Michael Penix is going to bring to the table for Atlanta over these next couple of weeks. And I wouldn't be surprised if we end up seeing the Falcons still the 7th seed and they maybe pull off upset early during the playoffs, because Michael Penix is a really good quarterback. Shout out to my guy Pete's Takes. He says Kirk Cousins had that 500-yard passing game and that drained his arm. LOL, bless the all. Shout out to everybody that's tuned in. The NFL MVP race is heating up, and there's a huge hypocrisy coming on with this debate, because you have Josh Allen, who is having the most efficient season of his career, 25 touchdowns, only 5 picks. He leads the league in quarterback rating, and he's been a monster on the ground and well, or can't talk today. Run that back. The NFL MVP race is heating up with only 3 weeks left of the regular season. There's a huge hypocrisy going on when it comes to the MVP discussion, because you got Josh Allen, who's playing the most efficient football of his career up to this point. 25 touchdowns, only 5 interceptions. He leads the league in quarterback rating. He also has 11 rushing touchdowns as well. And the Buffalo Bills have the 2nd best record in the AFC. Meanwhile, you have Lamar Jackson, who is having the best season of his career. Career highs in passing touchdowns, touchdown to interception ratio, quarterback rating, completion percentage. And right now, he is currently on pace to break the NFL single season record for passing rating. And he also has 743 rushing yards along with 8 rushing touchdowns to go along with that. And the MVP is going to come down to the 2 best quarterbacks in the National Football League. There hasn't really been any other quarterbacks playing as good as what Josh Allen and Lamar have outside of Joe Burrow, but the Bengals probably won't make it to the playoffs, so he's disqualified from this conversation. And last season, when Lamar won MVP, Josh Allen had better numbers. But the difference was that the Ravens had the best record in the AFC. So therefore, they gave him MVP based off him leading the Ravens to a more successful season than Josh Allen did with Buffalo. Plus, Josh Allen had around 18 interceptions, I believe. But this year, the tables have somewhat turned. Because although Lamar has better numbers than Josh Allen has led the Bills to more success this season. He is the only person who has been able to beat Kansas City this year. He's given them the only loss of the season, and he's been playing some incredible football down the stretch. And y'all got to remember what the expectations were for Buffalo coming into this year, which they weren't really that high. Remember, they lost Stephon Diggs. They traded him to Houston. You lose your other starting wide receiver, Gabe Davis, in free agency to Jacksonville, and you lose a ton of starters on defense. So it was expected that the Buffalo Bills were going to have somewhat of a drop-off, and their Super Bowl window was supposed to be over. But yet, with how incredible Josh Allen has been this year, pretty much playing like an alien, he's just unstoppable, it seems like. He's been able to elevate the Buffalo Bills to where they have overachieved. Meanwhile, for Lamar, in spite of how well he has played, the team still hasn't lived up to expectations, I feel. Because with them getting Derrick Henry, you would have thought that the Ravens probably don't lose no more than 2 games, maybe 3 max. But they already are at 5 losses. And if they lose to Pittsburgh this year, they probably don't end up winning the AFC North. And when you look at the last couple of MVP winners, they normally go to the quarterbacks that have won their divisions and have the most success in the regular season in terms of leading their team to the best record in their respective conference. So therefore, if the Ravens get swept by Pittsburgh, you're going to be looking at a possibility of you're making the argument for MVP going to a quarterback who didn't win his division, which kind of has become the new norm when it comes to this award. So therefore, you know, if Lamar won this award last year, despite not having better numbers than Josh Allen, but because the NFL and the MVP voters felt like he was more important to the Ravens having the best record in the AFC, you got to have that same energy with Josh Allen. Because Lamar has a way better team than what Josh Allen has. Josh Allen doesn't have a Derrick Henry. James Cook is a really good back, but he's no Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry is second in the league in rushing yards. He's been just as good as what Saquon Barkley has been. And you can also make somewhat of an MVP argument for Derrick Henry. If we are talking about just skill position players only, and we take quarterback out of this debate, Saquon Barkley, Jamar Chase, and Derrick Henry are in the mix. But with Lamar, his defense has let him down on several occasions this year. They lost to the Browns. Jameis Winston engineered the comeback in the 4th quarter in that game. You had a really shocking loss early during the season to the Raiders. You know, the Ravens just haven't been as good as expected. And it's not because of Lamar, but it's because of the team around them, the coaching kind of being a little bit wonky at times. So do you penalize Lamar for his team just kind of failing him in certain moments, and you kind of don't give him his 3rd MVP because of that, although his numbers reflect that he's the MVP this year? And do you give it to Josh Allen, who, although the stats don't reflect Lamar's, he's led the Bills to more success than what LJ has? You know, me personally, I feel you got to give it to Josh Allen, because at the end of the day, it's one thing to put up great numbers, but MVP also is a measure of how much you have contributed to your team's success. And your team's success isn't just about how much great numbers you put up, not how many games you've had with a perfect passer rating. It also is about, your record. And last season, Lamar won this thing because remember what the argument was. Well, Lamar has the best record in the AFC. Who cares about the stats? Well, if that's the criteria that we are judging who wins the MVP award off, then you have to have that same energy with Josh Allen this year. You sound hypocritical when you're going to make the argument for Lamar winning MVP last year based off the Ravens' regular season record, getting the 1 seed, but yet Buffalo has the second best record in the AFC right now, and plus Josh Allen has beaten 2 of the best teams in the league, the Detroit Lions and the only quarterback to beat Kansas City this year. I would give it them giving it to Lamar and not Josh Allen, despite the fact that he had better numbers. Now, you can argue that turnovers kind of didn't help Josh Allen's case, but Brett Favre had years when he won MVP with hella turnovers. At the end of the day, Josh Allen had more prolific numbers than what Lamar did, but yet he didn't get MVP. And he's been due for an MVP award. And if there ever was a year to give it to him, this would be the season with how efficient he has played. I love Lamar Jackson. If any of y'all come in the comment section saying, oh, you hating on Lamar, I'm going to block you from my channel. You will never be able to watch another video again. Because the thing about this discussion is that it's hard to argue against either one of these outstanding talents not winning this award. Because both of these guys have played at a career high level. The biggest issue with Josh Allen has been he's been a turnover machine throughout his career. So for him to play this level of efficient football with the Buffalo Bills not really having a true elite number 1 wide receiver, their defense kind of being up and down this year, he really has kind of been the example of what it means to be the MVP. You can say if you take Lamar off the Ravens, they want to be good, but you can say the same thing about the Buffalo Bills. And we've seen years in the past when Lamar Jackson has gone down with injuries, and yet the Ravens were still able to get to the playoffs with a guy like Tyler Huntley at quarterback. John Harbaugh has been able to overcome not having Lamar Jackson in the past. So as good as what Lamar Jackson is, the Ravens are still a great organization. They aren't a team that has been overly dependent on Lamar Jackson in years past. They got a great history of being able to win because John Harbaugh is a pretty good coach. It's just that in the big moments, he comes up short. Same thing can kind of be said about Sean McDermott. He's the best coach that the Bills have had since the 80s and 90s when they had Jim Kelly at quarterback. And Josh Allen, with how good he's been this year, if you take him off the Bills, they probably end up being one of the worst teams in the league. The defense isn't that good. The supporting cast around Josh Allen isn't as good as what Lamar's is. So therefore, you have to give the most valuable player award to the player that has done more with less, and that's been Josh Allen. Yeah, Lamar Jackson won the head-to-head early during this season, but that doesn't really matter when Josh Allen has beaten 2 of the top teams in the league. The Lions and the Chiefs look like the 2 teams that we most likely are going to see in this year's Super Bowl. So I would give it to Josh Allen, although I want to be against giving it to Lamar Jackson. I love Lamar Jackson. He's tied for my favorite player in the league all time, only to Jameis Winston, but it's just really hard to not give it to Josh Allen with what he's done this year and how he's been able to help the Buffalo Bills overachieve this season. Meanwhile, I just kind of feel like the Ravens have underachieved. They haven't played up to expectations somewhat. The Chicago Bears have done it again. They have broken another young, promising quarterback talent. Caleb Williams, his spirit just looks broken. When you listen to him and his post-game press conferences after these losses, and you watch him during the games, you see a quarterback that looks deflated. You see a quarterback that has lost all of his confidence. And although statistically he's had a pretty solid rookie season, 17 touchdowns, only 5 interceptions, he's overthinking things. When you watch these games, Caleb Williams just looks like he's too much in his head. I saw him overthrow a pretty easy touchdown in the Bears' Monday night loss to the Minnesota Vikings, where he had Keenan Allen. I won't say he was completely open, but it did look like a pass that Caleb Williams could have completed for a pretty easy touchdown if he would have put it on the money. But instead, he just kind of sells it. And Caleb Williams, I think his biggest problem this year has been that he's been trying too hard to live up to the hype that he had coming out of college. He's been trying to be a superhero. He's been trying to get a big play on every single play instead of taking what the defense gives him. And that's why he kind of is somewhat responsible for the amount of big hits and the amount of sacks that he has taken this year. Now, it's not all his fault why the offensive line has allowed him to get pulverized back there, because that unit has been one of the worst in the NFL. Ryan Poles, I don't really get the hype with this dude as a general manager. I get it. Like, he made a big finesse when they traded away the first overall pick. The Panthers got Bryce Young, and he got DJ Moore, a few first rounders out of it. But outside of that, a lot of his personnel decisions have not really worked out all that great. You know, Darnell Wright, their right tackle, he's up and down. He's not really that good. Anytime he gets matched up against an elite edge rusher. And Keenan Allen, he's a far cry from what he used to be during his prime with the Chargers. I don't even know if he's going to be back with this team next season. Roma Dunze has been nice. DJ Moore is nice, but DeAndre Swift, he's been up and down. You know, the Bears just haven't really been a good team this year. And I thought, along with a lot of others, that coming in, Caleb Williams was really well set to have a great rookie season, because it was believed that this was one of the best teams that a rookie quarterback could have ever received. But, you know, fast forwarding to now, I know hindsight is 2020. You know, this is a terrible situation that Caleb Williams is in, because I want you to think about this. The key to a young quarterback's development is what? It's not just talent. It's about stability on the coaching staff, because the easiest way to ruin a young quarterback is to have him overcome several coaching changes. Justin Herbert is a phenomenon because he's had to overcome 3 new head coaches in his first 5 years in the season, and yet he still produces at an elite level. When you look at Jameis Winston, who had to overcome several different head coaches in Tampa Bay with Lovie Smith, Dirk Cutter, Bruce Arians, look how his career panned out. Same thing with Marcus Mariota. He had several new head coaches and a new offensive coordinator doggone near every single season. So if you want to ruin a young quarterback's development, continue to swap out coaches. We didn't even get to the end of this season, and Caleb Williams is already on his second head coach and the second offensive coordinator. Thomas Brown was not the head coach who they had at the start of the season. It was Matt Eberflus. Shane Waldron was their offensive coordinator. And now he gets fired. Matt Eberflus gets fired. And now all of a sudden you got Caleb Williams with the coaching staff that didn't draft him. You know, they were on the staff, but they didn't really have a big say in drafting him per se. So here we go again. Once this season concludes, the Bears are going to be right back at the drawing board, hiring another head coach. And going into year 2, Caleb Williams is going to have to learn a new system, new terminology, get acclimated to a new head coach. And it's just rinse, wash, and repeat with the Chicago Bears when it comes to how they continuously destroy their young quarterback talent. I'm not going to say that Mitch Trubisky was all that great, but, you know, he did have his moments. He did take the Bears to the playoffs. And if it wasn't for a double doink, who knows how far the Bears could have went that year of how good Vic Fangio's defense was playing that season. And moving forward for Chicago, it's really pivotal that they nail their next head coach hire. I don't see Mike Vrabel being as good as a hire as what the media makes him out to be. He's a great defensive coach, but there's a reason why he got fired by Tennessee, because after Arthur Smith left to take that head coaching job with the Falcons, he whiffed on every other offensive coordinator since. Now, Tennessee didn't have a lot of talent on offense, you know, the final years of the Mike Vrabel years down there in Nashville, but it's like he just isn't that great with offense. He's a good culture builder. He's great with the defense, but the problem with Chicago is not the defense. You should be prioritizing a head coach who can develop your young quarterback. Now, Ben Johnson is a really hot name, but just because he's a great play caller doesn't mean that he's going to be a good head coach. Look at Shane Steichen with the Indianapolis Colts. Yes, Anthony Richardson doesn't look like a functional starting quarterback, but the reasoning why they felt comfortable drafting Anthony Richardson so high was because Shane Steichen did a fantastic job when he helped Jalen Hurts reach that next level the year the Eagles went to the Super Bowl and lost to Kansas City. He also was the OC who helped Justin Herbert have one of the greatest rookie seasons in NFL history. So the track record that Shane Steichen had as a coordinator is the reason why Indianapolis felt he could develop Anthony Richardson. And not only is he struggling to develop AR, but he just isn't a good head coach when it comes to understanding situational football. And you could see the same thing happen with Ben Johnson. If I was the Raiders, I would go after Jon Gruden. And I know that Jon Gruden is, a name that is really polarizing. He's kind of either you hate him or you love him. And things didn't really work out well in Las Vegas, his second go around with the franchise. But I believe Jon Gruden could be a great head coach hire for Chicago because, for one, in this situation compared to the Raiders a few years ago, he had to rebuild that team. The Chicago Bears are already a team that has enough talent in place that if you make the right coaching hire and you improve the offensive line, you could immediately make it to the playoffs and maybe be somewhat of a dark horse Super Bowl contender. He's one of the best offensive minds in league history. If there was ever a coach who could help Caleb Williams develop and reach his potential, it would be Jon Gruden, because Caleb Williams, if he reaches his ceiling, he's supposed to be the second coming of Aaron Rodgers or Patrick Mahomes. You mean to tell me that you rather swing with Ben Johnson, a head coach who is unproven, versus Jon Gruden, somebody who you know is at least going to be able to help Caleb Williams reach that next level? And the thing with the Chicago Bears is that you already gave it a run trying to hire a hot coordinator a few years ago when you hired Matt Nagy, and you saw how that played out. The problem with Jon Gruden is that he walked into a rebuild with the Las Vegas Raiders. The Bears are not in a rebuild. All they need is a good head coach, somebody that knows offense, somebody that can maximize Caleb Williams' skill set, and there's not a single head coach that's going to be available during this coaching carousel than Jon Gruden. The guy knows football. The guy gets along with all of his players. He may not get along with guys within the NFL, but there's never really been too many players that I've heard of that have had anything negative to say about Jon Gruden. This dude knows football. That's why he calls his podcast Gruden Loves Football. This dude is dying to get one more opportunity to coach in the NFL. And if the Chicago Bears were to hire Jon Gruden, I think that he will be able to be the best hired possible to get the most out of Caleb Williams. This dude just knows how to work with quarterbacks. He knows how to speak to a young quarterback, and he knows what it takes to develop one. He just is an offensive wizard. To me, hiring Jon Gruden is what the Chicago Bears need versus trying to get a guy like Mike Vrabel, who's a defensive-minded head coach, and trying to get a hot coordinator like a Ben Johnson. Just because Jon Gruden didn't work out in his previous stop doesn't mean that he can't work out with the Bears with the talent that they already have. And if Ryan Poles is this great GM, like how he's made out to be, you don't really have to worry about the misses in the draft, because Mike Mayock was responsible for those misses. He was responsible for getting Alex Leatherwood. I would love to see Jon Gruden get one more opportunity to coach in the NFL, and that last shot being with Caleb Williams, because he knows how to get the most out of a quarterback. Derek Carr had some of his best seasons ever when Jon Gruden was his head coach. He knows how to speak to a young quarterback's soul. He loves working with quarterbacks. I would love to see the Chicago Bears roll the dice on John Gruden. If I was going to roll the dice on the head coach that already has been around the block, that's experience, I would bring in Gruden. Because I really see him being able to take Caleb Williams to that next level. Shout out to everybody that's tuned in wherever you're watching. Shout out to M Sparks. He says, sup JT, Pittsburgh Steelers for life. Shout out to my guy Pete's Take. He says, hit that like button for this young man. I greatly appreciate it. Got to give you a mod. M Sparks, are you a mod? If you're not a mod, let me know. Because if not, then I'll make you a mod after this live stream. Shout out to my guys, because Nazi, he says, hey, JT, happy holidays. Same to you, my guy. Happy holidays to everybody that's tuned in. My guy No Lie says the NFL won't let Gruden coach, which is sad because you were spot on. I would love to see him go to Chicago. Shout out to M Sparks again. He says SOS the Bears. Shout out to everybody that's tuned in. We got a lot more to talk about. Don't go anywhere. Make sure that you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, turn on post notifications so you don't miss when we drop new content. If you're listening to this episode after it goes live on podcasting platforms, make sure that you share this episode with your friends, family members, and acquaintances. And remember, we are a diehard football channel. We are not an NFL or college football podcast. We are our everything football podcast. We talk college football, NFL draft, whatever it is pertaining to football, we talk about it 24/7, 365 days throughout the year. You know, if you're a diehard football fan, you live, eat, and breathe football like me, this is the right place for you. So make sure that you go ahead and you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss when we drop new content. We got a lot of things planned, and this is peak football season. You know, the playoffs is around the corner. We got the CFP on Saturday. We got some marquee regular season matchups that have major implications when it comes to defining how some of these teams are going to look going into the postseason. We're going to dive into those matchups, but I want to touch on the transfer portal real quick and how it has diluted the talent that we have coming into the NFL. Now, real quickly, I want to touch on how the transfer portal in college football is diluting the talent that we have entering the NFL draft. Because I've been listening to a lot of draft analysts and scouts talk about the upcoming 2025 draft class, and most of those guys are saying that this is one of the worst draft classes in terms of talents that we have had since the 2013 NFL draft. And I believe the huge reason for that is because of the transfer portal. Because in this new age of name, image, and likeness, you have guys who are transferring, who are chasing the bag instead of chasing the right program who can develop them. If you have a player who is a highly touted 5 or 4-star recruit coming out of high school and he doesn't start right away his freshman year, what does he do? He hits the portal and he goes elsewhere. And because of this, you have guys who are not developing. They're not learning the proper fundamentals. They're not learning the proper technique. And they also aren't mentally tough enough to handle the grind of the NFL, because anytime adversity hits, what do? They run to the transfer portal. And with the transfer portal having so many teams that are going in it to find guys who are already proven, guys that they don't really have to put too much time in developing, player development in college football is no longer a priority, because these coaches aren't really trying to develop you anymore. They're just trying to get the already proven players. That's why you see coaches like Deion Sanders prioritize the transfer portal more than he prioritizes high school recruiting, because he doesn't want to develop anymore. He just wants to get the already tailor-made player. And when it comes to the NFL, that's going to continue to dilute the talent that we have coming into the league, because you're not going to have a quarterback that has spent 3-4 years with the same program, has been developed and has improved every single year, you're going to get a lot of these quarterbacks that maybe they only had 1 or 2 good seasons with the program, and then they get drafted high in the first round of the draft, and then all of a sudden they end up not being that good because they didn't get the proper development. They just went to the right system and things were just, lightning meets fire. And then they get to the league, and then it's just a completely different ball game. Why do you think these quarterbacks that come from Lane Kiffin don't end up panning out? It's because of the system. And it's not just the transfer portal that is diluting the talent that we have coming into the NFL draft, but it also is the schemes as well. Because a lot of these schemes that these players are playing in are kind of engineering offense in a sense. They're engineering these players that have a lot of great stats, but they're not really developing them because they're not putting them in systems that are going to be able to help them have success at the NFL level. Like a lot of receivers that come from Tennessee, from that air raid offense, they don't end up being that good because they don't learn how to run the proper route tree. Remember Jalen Hyatt, who won the Biletnikoff Award a few years ago? And he got drafted by the New York Giants. I'll never forget, I saw a clip from a docuseries they did covering the NFL draft prospects. And one of the Dallas Cowboys coaches was saying, bro, you can't run routes. Well, look where that has come to when it comes to Jalen Hyatt's career now. He barely gets in. He's nothing more but a bona fide deep threat or a gadget player that comes in and runs jet sweeps. If he was playing on a school that actually ran somewhat of a pro-style system, he would have been better off for success at the next level. But with the transfer portal now, you got these coaches who are just looking for players who can be plug and play, immediately come into their gimmicky scheme, and not really try to prioritize developing them. If you had more players that were sticking with their programs for 2-3 years, you would have a better talent pool than what you have coming into 2025. Now, that's not to say that this upcoming draft class doesn't have a lot of decent talent, because there is a lot of good wide receivers. There are a lot of good running backs and offensive linemen, but not a lot of these guys are worth being drafted in the first round next year. There's probably about only 10, maybe 15 at the most of guys who are really high-end level players that deserve to be drafted within the first 15 picks. And the transfer portal, with how it has diluted the NFL talent pool, it's to the point where every single offseason, you got guys who probably done transfer 3-4 times. They strike fire with their last transfer. They go to the right school, but they still don't get the right development. So guys now, when they enter the league, you got to have a little bit more patience with waiting for them to develop. Instead of getting a wide receiver that can come in and be good right away, or a corner that can come in and be good right away, you may have to wait 2-3 years for that to happen. There used to be a time where if you drafted a young wide receiver or a young cornerback, they were good right away. Like Marshawn Lattimore. He was an elite cornerback as soon as he started his first day for the New Orleans Saints. Malik Neighbors is already one of the best receivers in the game. You're not going to have a lot of those kinds of players that are going to come into the league and be ready to produce as soon as day one at a high level. It's going to be similar to the effect that the AAU or AAU basketball has had on the NBA. The NBA has a high bust rate because of one-and-done culture. You got a lot of 17, 18-year-old players who are coming into the league and just don't have what it takes to thrive at the NBA level because they can't adjust to the speed of the game. And that's a similar road that the NFL could be driving down with how the transfer portal is diluting the talent that we have coming into the drafts, because these colleges are no longer prioritizing the development of these young athletes. And these young athletes, they don't care about going to the school who can develop them, who can best prepare them for the NFL. Their mindsets are, I'm going to chase the bag because there's a chance that I might not make it to the league, instead of betting on themselves, going to the team that gives them the best chance to develop, And instead, they just want to get the bag, and they want all of these guarantees that comes with it without putting in the work. That's why Nick Saban retired. Now, I want to break down some of the Saturday games in the NFL. We're going to start off with the Texans versus the Chiefs. So the Houston Texans, who have just locked up the AFC South for the second straight year in a row, they're going on the road to Arrowhead to take on Patrick Mahomes and the one-loss Kansas City Chiefs. And this game is going to show us a lot about how far the Houston Texans can go come playoff time. Because to me right now, with how bad their offense has looked these last 2 months, I believe they're going to be a one-and-done playoff team. But they could change my opinion if they're able to beat Kansas City or beat Baltimore next week, because these next 2 weeks are going to define the rest of how this year, how this season is going to go for Houston, because their offensive line has been a train wreck all season, especially when it comes to their offensive guard play. They aren't good at pass pro. CJ Stroud has been getting thrown around like a whack-a-mole back there, and then they're struggling to open up running lanes for Joe Mixon. So you got an offense that can't really do too much of anything because they already are losing the battle of the line of scrimmage. Plus, their second-year offensive coordinator, Bobby Slowick, who was a hot head coach candidate at the start of the season, he's in a slump along with C.J. Stroud. But their defense has played outstanding. Although they do have a good amount of injuries, you've lost Jalen Petrie, who's a really underrated player. That defense is not the same without Jalen Petrie on the field. And they definitely are somewhat hurting without his presence. But however, they've been able to make up with that with how good Derek Stingley has been. And you can make an argument that Derek Stingley deserves to win Defensive Player of the Year. I mean, the dude has been a definition of what it means to be a shutdown corner. If you throw it Derek Stingley's way, the pass either getting batted to the ground or the shit's getting picked off. And he also got a really good pass rush. Will Anderson is coming on in his second year. Danielle Hunter is pretty good. They got a lot of talent up front on their front seven. And they got a really good secondary. But offensively, you know, they put themselves in a bind because when they lost to the Detroit Lions, even though they forced 5 takeaways in that game, that showed you that their offense is not efficient. Because if you have an efficient offense, then you should be able to take advantage of a 5-turnover performance by your defense. They forced 4 turnovers last week against the Miami Dolphins in that win, and yet they only won that game by 1 possession. When your defense dominates the turnover battle, like what the Texans have done against the Lions and the Dolphins, you expect to win in more dominant fashion. But their offense just can't really get that much going. You know, they do have talent at wide receiver, even though Stephon Diggs has been out. You got Nico Collins, you got Tank Dell. Tank Dell has dropped off. His production in year 2 hasn't been remotely as good as what it was in year 1. And I know that firsthand because I drafted him in the 4th, 5th round in all of my fantasy leagues. Hasn't really done too much. It's not because of him. It's more so that C.J. Stroud is just struggling to get him the football. And going up against this Kansas City Chiefs defense, it's going to be tough sledding for Houston. Because Kansas City, the reason why they only got 1 loss this year, why they continue to win these close games is because of their pass rush, because of how good they are up front. You see, once you get this late into the season, your ability to dominate the line of scrimmage really matters the most. Because when you have a Chris Jones, you have a closer, you have somebody that can get the opposing team's quarterbacks off the field in the 4th quarter and get the ball back to your offense. Your pass rush is really important late during the season. And with the Houston Texans' inability to protect C.J. Stroud, I really can't see them winning this game. And I can also see them struggling the following week when they have to play the Baltimore Ravens because their pass rush is just as good as what the Kansas City Chiefs pass rush is. So for the Houston Texans this week, you know, this is going to be a big test for them because if they can show up, make this a competitive game, walk away with the win, there's a good chance that they could end up making somewhat of a deep playoff run. And even if they lose this game, let's say they keep it close, right? And they only lose by a touchdown or less. And they go and they beat the Baltimore Ravens next week. They could definitely make somewhat of a Super Bowl run this year, because coming into this year, I thought that the Texans were equipped to be a Super Bowl contender. I had them in the Super Bowl losing to the Green Bay Packers as my preseason prediction. But why that prediction has gone completely wrong in a sense in terms of the Texans not being as good as what I thought they would be is because they are not good up front. Their offensive line has completely hindered their production on offense. And with their lack of productivity on that side of the football, it makes it incredibly hard to see this team going far, which is why this game is going to be a really big test for the Miko Ryan, CJ Stroud and company, because if you can get right with Kansas City, you can win this game, or you can beat the Baltimore Ravens. It shows volumes about what you're going to be in the playoffs, because at this point, you're playing for seeding now. Because if you have to play a team like the Ravens in the first round or the Chargers in the first round, a team that is really stout up front, you're going to struggle. The playoffs kind of starts now for Houston. This is kind of their test. And they got to pass it with at least a B if they want to be able to get out of the first round. I know that the games got to be played. The games aren't played on paper. But when you see a team like Houston that could end up losing their next two games and they walk into the playoffs kind of limping and wounded animal mode, the majority of times those teams end up being easy first round exits. So Houston, I'm not saying this is a must-win game, but I am saying that you do want to see their offense have a good performance against what has been one of the top 3 best defenses in the National Football League this year. Now, the next game I want to talk about, we got Steelers versus Ravens Part 2. The last time these two teams matched off, we got Steelers versus Ravens Part 2. The last time these two teams faced off against each other, the Baltimore Ravens lost 18-16. It was a bad day for Lamar Jackson and company. They couldn't really get the ground game going. The wide receivers were having balls just fly through their hands. It wasn't really Lamar Jackson's best showing. This go around, the stakes are a lot higher for both of these two teams, because you have a Steelers team that right now you're having some skepticism about them, because you lose a few weeks ago to the Cleveland Browns Thursday night. Yeah, you're able to make up for it. Yeah, you beat them and you get a good win against Joe Burrow and the Bengals, but then you get tossed around by the Philadelphia Eagles. And this is the toughest stretch of the Steelers' schedule, because you lose to Philadelphia. Now you got to play Baltimore. And then next week, you got to play the Kansas City Chiefs. These 3 games are going to define what the Steelers could be come playoff time. Is this a team that truly is capable of contending for the Super Bowl this year? And then for the Baltimore Ravens, right now, you're just trying to keep yourself in position to get a home field playoff game, because I thought that the Ravens were going to have one of the best records in the entire NFL this season, and they have severely underachieved this year. And if you're a Ravens fan, you probably would agree with that. You wouldn't expect to lose to the Browns, the Raiders, and I'm pretty sure that you were not expecting to lose to the Steelers. I'm a Steelers fan, and I picked the Ravens to win this division, and I picked them to sweep Pittsburgh. But Pittsburgh is truly John Harbaugh's and Lamar Jackson's kryptonite. They just, for some reason, can't seem to crack the code against this team. And going into this game, they are a 6-point favorite. And right now, with your record, if you lose this game, yeah, you're not in jeopardy of missing the playoffs, but you're in jeopardy of having to go on the road to make it to the Super Bowl. It's more easier to have a path to the Super Bowl where you at least get 1 or 2 playoff games at home versus having to travel on the road. It's really tough to win on the road in the NFL, especially come playoff time. And by losing this game, it will further show that the Ravens are not the team that we expected coming into this season. You don't expect a team that has Super Bowl aspirations, where it's championship or bust, to get swept by the Pittsburgh Steelers. As good as what the Steelers have been this year, the Ravens should at least be able to split this season series 1-1. And if you were to go 0-2 versus Pittsburgh, it will be an indictment on this coaching staff, and it will be an indictment on this team, because they have a way more talented roster than what the Pittsburgh Steelers have. Defensively, the Steelers have more star players, but the Ravens got a couple of star players in their own right on defense. You got Marlon Humphrey, you got Kyle Hamilton, you got Roquan Smith, you got Adolphe Oweh, who has came on this season and he has stepped up. But Pittsburgh right now, with the injuries that they're dealing with, we don't really know the status of George Pickens, TJ Watt. He's been limited in practice this week. If there ever was a great opportunity for the Ravens to pounce on the Steelers, get one over on Mike Tomlin and company, kind of regain control of this division, this is it. And for Pittsburgh right now, you're just trying to survive, because right now with all the injuries that you have, you already clinched your spot in the playoffs, but you want to hold on to having that home field playoff game come wild card weekend. So the implications in this game, although both of these two teams are going to be locks and make it to the playoffs, right now, both of these teams desperately need this win, because this win is kind of going to show a lot about these two teams as we enter the final stretch of the season, and the most important stretch of the season, which is the postseason. Because if the Ravens can't beat Pittsburgh, then I don't know who they could beat in the first round. And there's a possibility that maybe we could see the Ravens play the Steelers for a third time this season in a wild card round. And if you're Baltimore, the last team you want to face again is Pittsburgh, because Pittsburgh has your number. They play you more than any other team that you could be matched up against in the postseason. And for Pittsburgh, you're hoping that you get a favorable home field matchup, probably against either the Chargers or the Denver Broncos. Those are the two teams that I probably, if I had to pick from, and I had to pick who would I rather play, it would be out of one of those two squads. Now, if you get to play Baltimore again, you feel confident about your chances being able to win that game, because you're so good at stopping Lamar Jackson and this offense, because you know how to get pressure on him. You know how to keep him contained in the pocket to some capacity. Of course, you can never completely stop and shut down a guy like Lamar. He always is going to get his. But, this is just a really big game in terms of what it's going to show about these two football teams moving forward. Pittsburgh is trying their hardest not to lose two straight. Because what if you lose to Kansas City? Then you're kind of in the same situation that you were in 2020. You started out hot, you started out undefeated, then you lose to the Commanders, and your season just spirals downhill from that point on. And you want to go into the playoffs playing your best football. You want to go into the playoffs hot. You don't want to go into the postseason cold. And that's kind of the dangerous territory that the Steelers kind of find themselves in going into this ball game against the Baltimore Ravens. So there is a lot at stake for both of these two rivals. This is going to be a physical game. It probably is going to be low scoring, but the stakes are really high. And this game coming in, you kind of feel like it has somewhat of a playoff vibe to it. Because, the intensity this late into the season is at an all-time high when you have so much on the line pertaining to the division and getting a first-round playoff game. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are a team that I've been hearing a lot about over these last couple of days. Could they possibly make some noise if they can get into the playoffs? Could they go on the road, beat a team like the Detroit Lions, or possibly end up beating a team like the Detroit Lions if they end up holding on to the division lead in the NFC South? Could they end up pulling off upset against a team like the Philadelphia Eagles? Could the Tampa Bay Buccaneers get hot enough come playoff time that they could be a surprise team that nobody expected to see playing in the conference title game with the shot at making it to the Super Bowl on the line, because right now they're one of the hottest teams in the league. So it's understandable why these conversations around Tampa Bay are starting to pop up more and more, because during the middle portion of the season, they got a little bit cold because of injuries, and Baker Mayfield and the offense, they just weren't really clicking well. They're winners of their last 4, and this offense is absolutely humming right now. They're 4th in the league in points per game. They're really good in the red zone and third down situations. And what's different between this year's Buccaneers team compared to the last 3 years that we've seen the Bucs play, they are finally able to run the football at an extremely high level. Bucky Irving has been one of the best rookies in the entire NFL on offense. I was really high on him coming out of Oregon. Even though he didn't have elite explosive speed, he has really good vision. He's a really tough runner. He plays bigger than his size. When you watch him play, he looks like he's a 6'2", 240-pound back with how he's just bouncing off guys, getting a lot of yards after contact, but he's pretty small. I think that he's barely 200 pounds, but the dude is a really good running back. He just has a knack for just picking up yards, and that's why he quickly has taken the starting role away from Rachaad White. Rachaad White has kind of become an afterthought in that offense, although they kind of are a 1-2 punch. When you think of their run game, you think about how efficient and how potent Bucky Irving has been. And when it comes to the Buccaneers defense, they are kind of having somewhat of a down season on that side of the football. You know, they're 30th in pass yards per game allowed. They're 19th in points per game allowed. But with how high octane their offense has been, you know, they definitely are one of those teams that you definitely can't sleep on them in the playoffs. You know, depending on who they get matched up against, maybe they could pull off the upset. But I'm not really banking on it. I don't really feel like the hype around the Buccaneers is completely justified, only because when you think of Baker Mayfield and Todd Bowles, they've normally been pretty good regular season performers. But once you get to the postseason, you know, and you're going up against some of the best teams with the best talents, with the best coaches in the league, you know, they tend to come up a little bit short. You know, Todd Bowles, Baker Mayfield against Kansas City late in that game, they weren't able to get it done. And anytime the Buccaneers have gone up against good teams, you know, they just haven't really always played their best football. Now, their best game probably was when they beat Detroit early during the season. But, you know, outside of that game, this just is a team that I have reservations about them if they were to get to the second round of the playoffs. If they have to go up against the Minnesota Vikings or the Philadelphia Eagles on the road, I don't know if I could trust Baker Mayfield and Todd Bowles in the spotlight. That because late in the fourth quarter, the Buccaneers, they just tend to beat themselves. Either Baker Mayfield has a costly interception or Todd Bowles' defense just doesn't show up. And this year, with how the Buccaneers have looked defensively, not really being as good as what they normally have tended to be under Todd Bowles, I really can't see the Buccaneers going anywhere past the divisional round of the playoffs again this year. Now, they made it to the wild card round last year because they clobbered a wounded Philadelphia team. That's a Philadelphia team that was banged up injuries, and they just went into the postseason just completely ice cold. But when they went up against Detroit, you know, they did give the Lions a fight, but they just weren't able to get it done because of Todd Bowles and Baker Mayfield just kind of falling apart in the fourth quarter late during that game. So I'm going to take a conservative approach on the Buccaneers. I got to see it to believe it. I don't doubt the Buccaneers somewhat being able to be a Cinderella story in the playoffs, because we normally do have a team from any conference that normally kind of gets a little bit hot late. They go into the playoffs hot, and all of a sudden, they're a team that nobody really expected to be in their conference championship. You know, the Buccaneers definitely do have the makings of being one of those teams because of them getting healthy at the right time and also them playing their best football the final month of the season. But just with the history and the track record that Baker Mayfield and Todd Bowles have in the postseason, I just can't really say that I can see the Bucs being a dark horse Super Bowl contender. I do think that this is a good team. They should be able to hold on to this division, but I just can't get behind the Buccaneers hype train as some of you other folks out there. I'm not saying that this isn't a good team, but I'm just saying that I have my reservations about Baker and Todd Bowles being able to step up in the biggest moments in the fourth quarter of these playoff games. I got bad news for you Cleveland Browns fans. The Deshaun Watson saga is not ending yet. According to reports, they are going to be running it back with Deshaun Diddy Watson in 2025. And this is just a complete nightmare for Cleveland fans and just this entire franchise, because you're getting scammed out of $230 million guaranteed. And it has kind of put you in a situation where you got no choice but to draft a quarterback high in the upcoming 2025 NFL draft. Now, I don't think that you're going to get Shedeur Sanders, because I couldn't see Dion allowing Shedeur to go to Cleveland. But I do think that trading up for Cam Ward is in play. And maybe the Browns are one of those teams that are willing to roll the dice and maybe draft Jalen Milroe a little bit higher than where he should be drafted. The potential is there. The arm strength, the athletic ability is all there. And Kevin Stefanski is one of the better offensive minds in the league. So if there was ever a coach who could get the most out of Jalen Milroe and to develop him to become a serviceable starting quarterback in the NFL, I think it would be him. And with this Deshaun Watson contract, it just has strapped you so badly financially that you're not going to be able to afford any of the other serviceable starters that are going to be on the quarterback market when free agency rolls around. You're not going to be in play for Sam Darnold. You're not going to have the money to pay him. And if Justin Fields hits free agency, you might not even have the money to get him. So therefore, your only best option at this point is just to draft a quarterback in the first round of this year's draft. And with Deshaun Watson probably stinking it up for another season, eventually you can get to a point where maybe you can kind of do the same thing that the Falcons did this season. You let Michael Penix sit behind Kirk Cousins, a veteran, for a few weeks, and then when he completely fizzles out and you're just sick of him, you go ahead and you start the rookie quarterback and you go from there. And that's the kind of situation that I think the Cleveland Browns are in at this point, because there's no way you can run it back with Jameis Winston being Deshaun Watson's backup. And I love Jameis Winston. He's my favorite NFL player of all time, but he's just too turnover prone. You can't trust Jameis Winston late in the game because you don't know what you're going to get out of him. And he's just too inconsistent. And with Deshaun Watson, this brother can't play anymore, especially coming off this season-ending injury. There's a chance that he could be a lot worse than what he was before. He may not have the same athleticism. And at this point, the only way that you're going to be able to get ahead of this quarterback nightmare and so be able to get out of it is by going ahead and rolling the dice on a guy like Jalen Milroe that does have the upside to become an elite starter in the NFL. Because if Deshaun Watson is going to have to start next year, you're going to have a guaranteed contingency plan, because you know that he's going to be on an incredibly short leash. This is going to be his third straight season starting for Cleveland, and you can't tolerate any more below average, bottom of the league quarterback play anymore, because guys pretty much are coaching for their jobs. Guys pretty much are, building this team with the mindset of, this is it. We got to go all in. And it's just a nightmare situation for Kevin Stefanski and their general manager, because if Deshaun Watson poops the bed again next year, you could be unemployed. Are you really going to allow that to happen? I don't see how the Browns don't draft a quarterback this year, because that's the only way you can somewhat give yourself somewhat of an emergency plan, just if Deshaun Watson just comes back and he just can't get it together. You know, you can't bank on Deshaun Watson being able to help save your job if you're Kevin Stefanski or whoever their general manager is. You got to go ahead and you got to be on the aggressive. And if you don't feel comfortable getting Jalen Milroe, you got to trade up for Cam Ward. And if that means trading up for the number 1 overall pick, giving up several assets to do so, I don't see the issue in that. Because I'd rather invest all in on a young rookie quarterback than go all in on Diddy Deshaun Watson again, because my job security is not safe at the moment. And I do think that this is an effed up situation that the Browns find themselves in, because I don't think any of us expected Deshaun Watson to just fall off the cliff like this. But talking to one of my homies, he was like, when you get into these kinds of off the field situations, these civil lawsuits, these civil cases, it just kind of messes with you mentally. And it's kind of hard to rebound from these kinds of situations. So with that, the Browns, you got to go quarterback in the first round. You currently have the 7th pick in this year's draft. And with you going to Dorian Thompson-Robinson, I don't see you winning another game this year. So possibly, maybe Tennessee can still win. Maybe Jacksonville still is a win. Maybe the Raiders can find a way to win, because the Raiders are trying to win. They're not tanking because they just are that bad. Antonio Pierce is trying to save his job. It's no guarantee that he's going to be coaching the Raiders next year. So there's a good chance that the Browns, maybe they can luck into the top 3 pick or the 2nd overall pick, and they can put themselves in position to either trade up or be in a spot where they can drive Cam Ward, because that has to be your contingency plan if you're Kevin Stefanski. You got to go up to your front office and you got to say, hey, man, like, there's no way in hell I'm about to bank my future and our job security on this quarterback that is scamming us for $230 million fully guaranteed. We got to go ahead. We got to draft the rookie quarterback. Now, you can say, okay, what if Kevin Stefanski is guaranteed to get another year because they know how bad Deshaun Watson is and they got no other option but to play him next season, because they really don't. You can bench him, but are you really going to be okay having the highest paid backup in the history of the league? Like, you're trying to get everything that you can out of this dude. So, of course, you want to give it one more shot. But if it doesn't work out, you may be in position to draft Arch Manning, Drew Aller, whoever else is going to be the top signal callers in the 2026 NFL draft. But there's a high chance none of those guys want to play for you, because you just have this reputation of being such a dysfunctional franchise that whichever quarterback you draft, their career is pretty much over in a sense. Look how much Baker Mayfield has thrived ever since he got away from Cleveland. So for the Browns right now, you got to go quarterback this year. This is the only way you can give yourself some assurance that, okay, we know that we're going to give Deshaun Watson 5-6 games, and if he still doesn't improve, we're going to the rookie. You know, if you want to take a swing at Jalen Milroe or Cam Ward, Kevin Stefanski is the right head coach to do so. Now, the last thing I want to talk about before I get up on out of here, there's this assumption that the Las Vegas Raiders, all they need is a quarterback to change the trajectory of their franchise. They are a quarterback away from being a playoff team, and I don't think that could be any further from the truth. Even if the Raiders are able to get their hands on a Shedeur Sanders or a Cam Ward, they got way more issues than just quarterback. First of all, Antonio Pierce. I don't hate Antonio Pierce. I was rooting for Antonio Pierce to succeed, but right now, we do not know if this brother is a good head coach. As bad as this team has played, because of the injuries that they've had, and they knew coming into this year, they pretty much were handicapping themselves, handcuffing themselves with their quarterback position. They did try to trade up for Jaden Daniels. They did try to move up a few spots in the draft, but this ain't Madden. You can't manually force a team to trade with you, no matter how dire you may need a quarterback. But there have been a lot of games that the Raiders have been in this year that have came down to the final possession or the last 5 minutes, and Antonio Pierce just completely mishandles the game. When you have a team that loses the way that the Raiders have, against Kansas City on that Black Friday game, and they just continuously find ways to fumble, easy wins, and one possession losses, special teams mishaps, weird turnovers late, that's an indictment on the coaching. I was listening to Bill Belichick's coach podcast, and he was stressing the importance of situational football. When you can win situational football, it doesn't matter how much talent you have, because you just know ways to win games depending on certain situations if they are close late. And Antonio Pierce just plays things way too conservative. He's coaching like a guy who's just trying to get by this season, even though his job security is up in the air. Because Tom Brady, with him being the minority owner, I'm pretty sure that Mark Davis is going to lean on him a little bit when it comes to making these personnel decisions and these head coaching decisions. And I don't know if Tom Brady has seen enough out of Antonio Pierce to warrant giving him a second season to prove himself. And there's no guarantee that even if you do get Shedeur and Cam Ward, that Antonio Pierce is going to look better than what he's been this season, because the main selling point on Antonio Pierce was that when he took over for Josh McDaniels as the interim head coach, he made this team competitive. They were able to turn the season around. And although they didn't make it to the playoffs, you thought that you kind of had a little bit of lightning in the bottle with Antonio Pierce, and you already fumbled by not giving Rich Bisaccia the full-time job when he took the team to the playoffs a few years back as an interim head coach, and they lost to the Bengals in the wild card round. You didn't really want to make that same mistake with Antonio Pierce, and plus, all of the players were behind him. They rallied behind him. They wanted him to get the full-time head coaching job. And now if you were to ask Max Crosby how he feels about that, because remember, Max Crosby threatened to demand the trade if Antonio Pierce didn't get the job. I wonder if he still feels that same way now with how the season has played out, because the Detroit Lions have a shit ton of injuries, and yet they're 12-2, one of the best teams in the NFL. They got like 10 guys that have started on their defense on injury reserve. So injuries are not an excuse for poor play, when a lot of these games that the Raiders have lost have been due to Antonio Pierce just playing things too safe late in these games. And then your offensive line is not good. You only got two good offensive linemen, Cohen Miller at left tackle, and your outstanding rookie offensive lineman, Jackson Powers-Johnson, who you drafted out of Oregon. That's about it. Your other offensive line positions need some desperate help. You got to address those in free agency. You got to address those in the draft. You got to get more wide receivers, and you definitely got to get a running back. I mean, I think that there's a possibility that after you take a quarterback in next year's draft, that you trade back into the first round and you draft Boise State running back Ashton Jeanty, because you just need more playmakers on that offense. I like Jacoby Myers. Trey Tucker is a good deep threat, and you do have Brock Bowers, but you need more dynamic players on the outside. You need more elite perimeter players. And defensively, your front seven is going to be good when you get Max Crosby and Christian Wilkins back. But your linebackers could be better. You could do better than Divine Diablo, who was a converted safety, who went to linebacker. You got Robert Spillane, who is okay, but he's okay. You can do better. Your secondary is solid. I like Nate Hobbs. I like Jack Jones. You could probably get another boundary corner to put alongside Jack Jones. Maybe get another safety. But, drafting a quarterback is still not going to make the Raiders a playoff team next year unless they're able to know that Antonio Pierce is the guy to lead this team to success. Are they going to be able to improve this offensive line? Are they going to be able to build off the selection of Jackson Powers-Johnson? Is Cohen Miller still going to be able to sustain this high level of play getting into the older ages and the later stages of his playing career? Do you need to go ahead and just draft your franchise left tackle of the future and a very talent-rich offensive tackle class? These are the questions that you have to ask yourself when it comes to assessing the future of the Raiders, because getting Shedeur Sanders, yeah, it sounds good, but the team around him wouldn't be that good. All he has is Brock Bowers, and who else? He has a bad offensive line. He's already been playing with crappy offensive lines in Colorado. Why not give him a good one for a change? You know, he already had no run game at Colorado. He's going to walk into the same situation in the NFL that he had in college. And it's a lot tougher to win when you got no offensive line and no run game in the NFL than what it is to do in college. It makes the transition a lot tougher than what it has to be. There are just so many areas that the Raiders have questions at that, you know, drafting a quarterback is a must, but they got way more areas to address than just QB. QB is important. Nobody's denying that, but you don't know if you got a good head coach. Your offensive line is bad. You need running backs and wide receivers. You just need playmakers on that offense outside of Brock Bowers and Jacoby Myers. There's just so many holes that the Raiders have that drafting a quarterback is not going to completely save this team per se. This is it for this episode of JT Sports Live. I appreciate you guys for tuning in. Shout out to everybody that tapped in tonight. Shout out to my guy, M. Sparks. He says, yep, JT, if I recall, Tampa spanked them boys last year in the playoffs, sent them Eagles packing. He says, pick six, famous Jameis. I like that one. He says, the Raiders are tanking for Sanders. My guy, Jai, says, you know ball. I appreciate that, my dude. I appreciate everybody that tuned in. Before you get up on out of here, do me a favor. Smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit that bell icon so you don't miss when we go live and drop new content. Remember, we are a diehard football channel. We talk NFL, college football, 24/7, 365 days throughout the year. If you are a football nerd like me and you just live, eat, and breathe football, this is the right place for you. Go ahead, subscribe to the channel. Give us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcast from. Apple, Amazon, Spotify. The links to the podcast are down in the comment section and in the pinned comments down below and in the description. And I will see you guys shortly with another episode.